Okay, so I want you to remember the last time that you saw a vivid depiction of the future of technology. Maybe it was something that you saw on Netflix, and most likely it was either a mildly or a disturbingly dystopian view of the future. While this makes for really great entertainment, it is not always the way in which that we imagine technology and humans should be interacting with each other. So for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to imagine myself in the future as a designer. This is a future in which AI permeates every aspect of my professional life. So my AI remembers every person I met, every conversation I've had, every design review that I attended. My AI also acts as a symbiotic extension of my hand when I create designs. The AI also knows every designer that I like, my favorite designers, and it can infuse some of their styles into the design that I'm creating. And I'm spending countless hours talking to my AI about design, and I really appreciate its honest and its sort of nuanced feedback about it. So it's not like having a good friend, it's even deeper than that. So let's step back from this future a little bit and talk about where we are today. So by all accounts, we live better than ever before. You know, when the author Harari wrote in his book Homo Deus that today, for the first time, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little. And more people die from old age than from infectious diseases. Technology today promises us boundless knowledge, boundless and instant knowledge, and it also promises to streamline every aspect of our lives. Yet, we are increasingly getting flooded with information all around us. There's there's constant news, stories, videos, and constant connectivity to the internet. And with that, our attention has become our scarcest and most valuable resource. Our phones have become so powerful and so helpful as well that we are with them every free minute. We have really gotten used to get instant access to everything. We're also mixing our work life with our personal life, and in the process, we have almost forgotten how to be alone with our thoughts or how to be present in the moment. What's interesting, though, is despite of all these changes, we as a species really haven't evolved that much. The famed biologist Wilson said that today we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And I think that sums it up really well. So we're coming to understand that some of the new technologies we introduce are having unintended side effects. Increasingly, we are having to adapt to the constraints of technology, and in a way, it probably should be the other way around. So teenagers right now, in the last 6 years, are showing that increased signs of joylessness and uselessness, which are typical symptoms of depression. And this is something that was done in a study in the US, and that number has gone up by a staggering 33% in the last 6 years. And it turns out that face-to-face contact between humans is one of the deepest wellsprings of human happiness. And without it, our kind of mood starts to change. One side to my. So a lot of it, not all of it, but some of it points to the screens that are in our hands. Another study has shown that almost half of all teenagers would rather break their hand than break the phone and not be able to use it. And that clearly is a little bit of concern. I know about this because for over a decade, I've been designing smartphones that have landed in the hands of millions. And together with a team of talented designers, we really worked super hard to defy the constraints that were set upon us by the industry and by the engineers. And in the meantime, we have collectively made the phones the superstars of our generation. Now, today, artificial intelligence and immersive computing are basically the most meaningful challenge or event to happen in our lifetime. And it poses kind of a unique dilemma for us as creators, is how do we design and develop products that both engage and disengage us with them? So why am I here talking to you about this? I mean, one can argue that a computer scientist or even a philosopher would be better qualified to talk about this hot topic. Well, it turns out that as industrial designers, we are trained to cut through the complexity of technology, to pull out the good nuggets and to put them to good use. If we're doing our job correctly, we get out of our little bubbles of our secretive labs and we immerse ourselves into the solution space. We meet people to empathize with their needs, and we use our intuition to guide us in the process. What we try to do is anticipate what's going to happen in the future. And by looking ahead, 5 to 10 years, we can make much better decisions about what to do with our products tomorrow. And we realize that the consequences of our actions may come back 20-fold in the future in good or bad ways. And so what fascinates me most as a designer today is how we're going to direct, or hopefully redirect, our relationship with technology. So I was raised in Switzerland, and I was formed in Silicon Valley, and that gives me two unique perspectives in a way. On the one hand, there's the sort of observing and inquisitive nature that was instilled upon me in this country, and on the other hand, there's the unencumbered optimism and willingness to try things that is typical in California. And for me, this optimism also helped me to start a design agency and to start working with companies and partners that were at the forefront of technology. Computers here. One of those yes, but before, did I jump over one? No. But before starting my adventure in Silicon Valley, I learned the craft of design at this school that was nestled in the hills of Hollywood, or Los Angeles, I should say. And one of the things, it had a very strong belief that design could empower people, which was influenced very much by the Bauhaus in Germany as well. And the early tech industry as well had a strong belief in empowering people and in giving a platform for diverse voices and in sharing information. And so if we want to understand what the impact of technology is on us people, then we need to think about behavior change. And I want to walk you through kind of the evolution of the computer and how humans interact with the computer. So think about, first came the mainframe computing, and really that was an era when only scientists in labs in white coats would operate the machines with knobs and dials. Then came the personal computer, and with it, of course, screens, keyboards, displays, and that was already a more familiar way to interact with the machine. Then with the smartphone came a very intuitive interface where you can directly interact with your finger on the software. But the most intuitive interface is the world around us, one in which you move in, one that you perceive, and one which you can interact with. So you see what all of these shifts have in common is that there was an advance in the human-computer interface. And I think for me as a designer, this has always been one of the most interesting sort of intersection. And when I worked with Amazon on the first Kindle, it was one of those moments where you realize how a huge behavior shift can happen through a simple piece of hardware, and of course the back end that goes with it. When we started designing phones in the beginning, we had no idea just how much of our lives would be happening through these kind of small displays. And so while we've seen this tremendous progression in mobility that we all benefit from, we've also seen kind of a regression in screen size. I mean, a lot of the tasks that we used to do on big screens or analog, we are now doing on these small screens. And so this is where the promise of virtual reality comes in, is that we have at our disposal virtually unlimited screen space. And the Vive depicted here was the first immersive wearables that I got to wear on, and it really showed me the potential of such technology to shift our behavior. Small design change, or design changes in general, can also have an impact on behavior change. When I joined Google, one of our main leitmotifs was to make technology more approachable. And our use of soft materials has really started to change how people think about technology. So we're just starting to understand how AR and VR are influencing the way and changing the way that we think and we feel. I want to walk you through a few examples. Today, we're using smartphone AR in many practical ways. One of them here is the navigation that Google does. In the world, there are also about 800 million people who cannot really properly read. And for those people, the engineers at Google built this text-to-speech feature into the Lens app. And it enables people to just point their phone at a text and be able to hear it spoken out. And those are actually very, very helpful tools that exist today. But looking ahead a little bit, driving to work is going to become driving and working. And if you think about an ideal place to be using virtual reality, that's going to be these autonomous vehicles. And people can choose to basically be productive during that time or just go on virtual explorations. For many people, the office won't be really necessary anymore. They become obsolete because they can create their virtual offices from anywhere that they work from. And that's going to be just a continuation of the evolution that's already happening right now. The notion of telepresence is going to become more and more real. With the ability of having hyper-realistic avatars and environments, we're going to be able to transcend, actually, a lot of the barriers that are imposed on us today, such as race and culture and gender. And this is going to be possible through avatars. VR also is enabling today a lot of people to transcend their abilities or disabilities and go to places that they could never go otherwise. In other places, VR is being used as a so-called diversion or exposure therapy, and it can really help people who have post-traumatic stress syndrome, anxiety, pain, or even addiction. But VR is very strong when it comes to emotional content. Imagine one day where you're going to be able to rewind to any place or any experience that you've experienced in life. Or even more so that you could meet a loved one who's passed away again in a virtual world. VR is also great as a narrative tool because it allows us to see life the way that others would see it. So it's a great empathy tool. It can enable us to see what it's like to live in poverty, to live with autism, to live with blindness. And I think the main keyword here is that it's experience. It's not that you see it or hear it or read about it. You experience it, which is something very different. And the picture up here shows a clip from a recent video that Google did about conflict minerals in Uganda. And the medium that was used here to depict what it's like to be in a mine was, of course, VR, which is very effective. Now, AR really enables us to see stories about the world around us. And one of those things that you can imagine is that you can look at any objects and immediately see the sort of circular life of it or the carbon footprint of it just by looking at it. And you can imagine what kind of sensible choices that will help us to make in life. And one thing that I personally am excited about is that I think that AR is going to lead to a steady increase of democratized art, where people basically aren't confined anymore by the constraints of size or of budget or of location. So, what is the kind of hardware that we need to make this future possible? A lot of people like me who work in the industry believe that one day AR smart glasses will be as natural as putting your clothes on. And I think they're going to be light, they're going to be comfortable, they're going to be beautiful, they're going to give you super hearing, super vision, they're going to be able to overlay information on top of the real world, and sense as you would sense the world. The two benefits of it is going to be you don't have to pull out your phone anymore, and you won't have to look down anymore, which is going to give us better posture. So the future is truly looking up. So can we expect this to become part of our day-to-day routine? Yes, we can, but there probably won't be a particular breakthrough moment. Rather, we're going to see a steady development of smartphone AR. The capabilities of a phone to sense is going to get better and better. Already we can see how many cameras are getting packed into phones. But on the other hand, we're also going to see how head-mounted displays are going to become smaller and smaller and more comfortable. And eventually those two will converge. And I mean, what I also wanted to say is there are some massive advancements in technology that are required to do that. And many people are working on it, but it's not going to happen just tomorrow. So in the meantime, there are researchers and innovators around the world that are working on making AI truly helpful for humans. This is an example from the Silicon Valley. It's a company that is called Plenty, and they do vertical farming indoors. And they claim that with the use of machine learning, they can reduce the amount of water and energy that they use by 95%. So things like that are extremely promising. But one of the things I think all of us can be excited about is this notion of personal AI. And the promise is quite simple. If you have a truly useful AI, it can take over a lot of the tedious work that we have to do today. In the meantime, that means that we're going to be less tethered to the computer. We're going to have more time for human engagement. We're going to need fewer displays, and we're going to get more knowledge in return. And we're going to be able to have more time to do productive, creative work, or just daydream. Now, how do we get to this optimistic vision of computing without compromising our human needs? Certainly, it is more complicated than just switching our smartphone to black and white mode. Jeff Raskin, who's the father of the Macintosh, said, "An interface is human if it's responsible to human needs and also considerate of human frailties." And such a human weakness, for instance, is our sensitivity towards social status and the anxieties that this can bring about. And we're experiencing that very strongly on the internet today. So rather, we should focus on and also learn about what makes us truly human. And I think on the sort of top level, what makes us human is our relationships, our emotions, and our thoughtfulness. And if we look a little bit closer at our human needs, we realize that none of those human needs really necessitate any of those technological advancements that we're experiencing right now. It turns out that sometimes the most efficient way to do something isn't the most human way. So here are 5 design opportunities for those of you out there who are in the business of working with AI in the future, not just designers. So the first one is I think we need to think of AI as augmented reality, or augmented intelligence, augmented intelligence. And really it should be an extension of the human and not a replacement. So it shouldn't be a character, it shouldn't be a pet, it shouldn't be like a toy. The Asa Raskin, who's the head of Humane Computing Society, he compared it to a cello. He said it's a tool that liberates and extends human creativity, talent, and imagination. I think that's a nice way to sort of sum it up. And also the other thing that it made me think about is the electric bicycle, because it requires human strength to propel the bicycle, and so it's truly an extension of you, it's not a replacement. So as we're venturing into more unknown territory, it's really critical that we make AI legible. So that means that for people who use AI, they need to be the AI needs to be understandable and it needs to be transparent. We need to make sure that we don't dumb down the AI, but we also shouldn't make it something that it really isn't. It's only a matter of time before we're going to be wearing cameras on our bodies. But the path there is going to be painful, or it's going to include some pain. Just think about Bluetooth headsets, the adoption of it, or even Google Glass. Today, the car industry for electric cars is having to invent noises to replicate the engine noise because of safety issue, to make bystanders aware of the car's presence. And in the same way, designers that work with AI are going to have to come up with social cues. They're going to have to invent them in a way, social cues that let other people know how engaged is that person with the AI right now and how present are they. I think that's going to be one of those key questions. Now, the phone isn't going away anyway anytime soon. We know that. It's here to stay, but we may have reached peak reliance on it right now. I think it would be nice to think about products that don't require us to take the phones out of our pockets or to, spend hours crunched over our phones with our necks strained and our fingers contorted. So, let's think about products that don't send us down into an abyss of distraction all the time. Let's think of products that are smarter than a smartwatch and at the same time less invasive than an implant. It's somewhere in between there. So I think the increased exposure that we have to digital and abstract content means that people are yearning for touch and for tactility. And so on the hardware side, there's a great opportunity to make to involve more of our senses and make products more tactile. Jumped over one. At Google, we've sort of really taken that approach to heart. And we are, as I mentioned before, this sort of soft and warm and fuzzy approach to technology is something that we're putting on our speakers, on our phones, and our VR headsets. With all of this, we need to consider the side effects, as I mentioned earlier. When we think about that evolution of computers, for instance, that I talked about, there were side effects at every step of the way. With the mainframe, there were knobs and dials and ergonomic issues to resolve that. And now today, when we use swiping and clicking and so on, we have repetitive stress syndrome or damage. And then going forward with voice input, we're having privacy issues. And we can imagine that maybe the next wave of computer input is based on emotion and thought. And we're going to have to consider what the consequences are of that. Now, some people worry that the hyper-realism that's created by AR and VR could be confusing for people. But I believe really strongly that that's actually going to make us have to seek more authentic experiences outside of the world of computer. It's going to connect us even more to nature because we're going to really see that difference, and we're going to need to feel the difference even more so. So that's sort of a summary of things that for creators in the future, they need to become fluid, and especially in the design world, they need to think, they need to be experts at the topic of trust and how to gain trust with users, but authentically. They need to understand tactility. So even in the world of AI, physical products are going to be always important. We need to understand fashion because we are wearing things on our heads, and it really needs to respond to how we feel about ourselves and so on. One size never fits all. Physical and interface design are going to blend more and more, and we're going to have to accommodate the smallest of screens and unlimited screen space, which is essentially the world. So we're not going to get the future that we fear or the future that we wish for. We're going to get the future that we plan for. And in doing so, we can do some good, and we can also do good business with it. That goes hand in hand. Now, there's little point in demonizing technology because it always brings some benefits and then some challenges with it. And I think we sort of need to be we need to safeguard the technology and sort of like keep a check on how it infiltrates our lives. In the end, those are all just tools. Just like language, we have to learn how to use it and become fluid in it. I like this image of one of my favorite childhood books, Dinotopia, where humans and dinosaurs can coexist peacefully, and I see that very similar with this advanced technology. So of course, along the way, some of our revolutionary ideas, our brave ideas, will be met with resistance. This is what customers want today, or this is what the kids are into, or we have to go with the bottom line. And I think very often it just takes some courage to go against those short-term tactical objectives, to do the right thing. So I think we should move from what can we do with technology to really what should we do with technology. And so I think in summary, AI and immersive computing are both going to evolve as a medium to facilitate learning, understanding, and also connection across of a lot of borders. And I believe that if it's used wisely and with a lot of intentions, these tools can become powerful allies in the future that we actually really want. Thank you.